Hello and welcome to the Satluj TV podcast. Today's returning guest is Dr. Singh Grewal, MD, a distinguished cardiology specialist in California with over 48 years of experience. Dr. Grewal is also a passionate advocate for Sikh and Khalistan causes. He's the co-founder of SikhHeritageEducation.com that documents and archives material relevant to Sikh rights and history, and was also the co-founder of World Sikh News, a hard-copy newspaper that ran for 12 years before the digital revolution took over. Deeply impacted by the events of 1984, Dr. Grewal has since then been a very powerful advocate, ensuring the world never forgets those events. Dr. Grewal, welcome and thank you for joining us once again today.
Good morning, Angus. Waheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji ki Fateh.
Now, Dr. Grewal, we often talk about India's repression of human rights, and particularly its persecution of its minorities, most of all the Sikh community. We've also often compared what's happening there to the early days of the fascism that took control of Germany in the 1930s. But there's another regime that India is increasingly being compared to, and that is of the Apartheid regime of South Africa that horrified the world through the middle of the 20th century. And it's that comparison that I'd like to discuss today. So, Dr. Grewal, do you actually believe modern-day India is indeed operating an apartheid regime?
Yes, Angus. I strongly believe the apartheid word originated from South Africa, where there was a discrimination and all kind of atrocities against the blacks. So that was on the color base. In India, it's religious apartheid based on the religion, not necessarily on the color. In South Africa, there was widespread condemnation and pressure to end the discrimination regime, primarily through international sanctions, boycotts, and diplomatic isolation, with the United Nations leading the charge, particularly after the Sharpeville massacre in 1960, which drew global attention to the brutality of system. This pressure eventually contributed significantly to the dismantling of the apartheid and the release of Nelson Mandela. Bishop Tutu, a moral voice of the world who traveled all over the world, played a significant role. So in India, this religious apartheid has reached monumental proportions, and it is much worse than what happened in South Africa. But, the Indian government especially has been very clever, tried to minimize it or hide it, and for some reason the world has failed to recognize or at least take some action to make sure this ends. So this is what I think is happening.
Sorry, Dr. Grewal, I just wanted to interrupt there, just to sort of say, of course, it's one thing to just say that it is an apartheid regime. Would you like to set out in more detail why then, what sort of evidence you have for this?
So I'm going to start a little bit going back. So 1947 was a partition of India, but this process took place in early 1900s, where first there was a discussion on dominion status, then freedom, and a lot of discussion for 20-30 years took place. And some of the visionaries who could see what's happening today already described that. One of them was Professor Puran Singh, a Sikh intellectual who actually studied in Japan and came back to India. He was a chemist by profession. He wrote a letter to Simon Commissions. John Simon was a member of parliament who came in 1928 to India. So this was a preliminary discussion, what kind of India and constitution will be. So he wrote a letter. He said, in India, there are Muslims, there are Sikhs, Christians, and all other things. But there's no true Indian because of the thousands of years of this society. They have failed to raise a true Indian who loves his country like Japanese will do or Englishman will do, who will put the interest of country before him and will have a burning passion to serve it. So he could see what was coming. He wrote to the Simon Commission, then don't be so small so that give India in the hands of one powerful community and thus reduce the other minor communities to eternal slavery, even under democratic institutions. By cutting the countries into Muslim provinces and Hindu provinces, you would be only introducing a slow-eating consumption of civil anarchy, which could kill the weaker communities. Where the Hindus prevail, Muslims shall suffer, and where the Muslims prevail, the Hindus shall suffer. So next part is very interesting. And as I have already said, while communities like that of the Sikhs may risk fighting to the death and ask for purely Sikh province. So what we are fighting for, Khalistan today, or Sikh province, he could see that coming in 1928, for somehow rest of the people did not recognize, and the grievances was not addressed. Another visionary, Swami Dharmatirtha, this gentleman grew up in Kerala, belonged to some low caste, upper caste and low caste. There are thousands of castes in India. He has written a book, Menace of Hindu Imperialism. The second copy was published in 1946. That's the one I studied when I was in high school, and I've always kept with him. So he addressed the same thing to the British, that you're leaving India in the hands of people, what kind of society it'll be. So his main concern was, he said, in this country, to be born free is the most elementary and most fundamental of all rights of man. This is denied by the Hindus. The status and rights of a Hindu were determined before the birth, and nothing thereafter can alter them. So people are born in a society where they cannot change their future based on anything that they can do. So then his main opposition was what they call that India will have a Hindu law. So the term Hindu is not defined satisfactorily. Its scope is made to depend upon the scope of Hindu law. But the bills do not say that what is Hindu law, because there's no such thing known to people. This is changing all the time based on what they need to do. Hence the courts and the people left are hitherto the mercy of the ancient scriptures. Terms like caste, varna, gotra, etc., not defined but refer to the Hindu law. He also recommended leaning on Hindu law is quite unnecessary and is resorted to because the bills want to preserve some ideal customs, which is quite irrational. So, this today we can refer it to Article 25, where everybody, including Sikhs, are defined in Hindu law. So the people's choice and freedom has been curtailed by so-called Hindu law, which is no definition. There's no definition of Hindu or Hindu law. They keep changing as it suits the government or the 5% of the Brahminical society. Another very prominent freedom fighter and visionary, Periyar E.V. Ramaswamy, was a Tamil leader who was very active in Congress. Congress has started schools for the education of children where there were no school. And one of the such schools was in his area where the Brahmin was the headmaster. And these children will be sitting segregated and they were not allowed to mix. And he complained a lot to Mahatma Gandhi, so-called Mahatma, and the great soul. But he could not convince him to end it. As a result, he left Congress and spent all his time fighting against this religious apartheid. Winston Churchill, one of the world leaders, before even he became a prime minister, he was very, very angry with Gandhi. Now, he did not like Gandhi's policies. He called Gandhi as one who was seditious in aims, whose evil genius and multiform menace was attacking the British Empire. Churchill called him a dictator, a Hindu Mussolini, fomenting a race war, trying to replace the Raj with the Brahmin cronies, playing on the ignorance of the Indian masses, for all the selfish gain. Churchill attempted to isolate Gandhi, and his criticism of Gandhi was widely covered by the European and American press. He called Gandhi a malignant, subversive, fanatic, and a seditious Middle Temple lawyer, now posing as a fakir of a type well known in India, striding half naked up the steps of the Viceroy Palace. So, I read something and I said, why was Churchill against the Indians? So I kept believing that Churchill did not like Indians. But having opportunity to read some more literature, he was not necessarily against Indian. He was saying, how can you leave the country against these Gandhi-type people who don't treat their own people equal right? How can this work for the society? Lord Wavell, General Wavell, was the viceroy for 3 years until February 1947. He's the architect of dividing India into India, Pakistan, and all this was done. He also did not like Gandhi. So his assessment was that Gandhi was a single-minded. He just wanted to overthrow the British rule and influence and to establish a Hindu Raj, called Gandhi a malignant, exceedingly shrewd politician. Wavell thought the civil war will ensue and Gandhi will not be able to stop. That's exactly what happened. So some of the other Indian leaders who fought for freedom, they were no better. Some of the names are Lala Lajpat Rai, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Veer Savarkar, Lala Hardayal. They were all actually fighting for Hindu Raj. Their vision was the British will leave, they will have Hindu Raj, they will convert Muslims back to Hinduism. So that was the vision of the people who want their freedom and the control after 1947 went to them. The country is run by them or their descendants, and the religious apartheid has become the practice of every day, and majority of the people are suffering. Only small percentage is enjoying.
Well, Dr. Grewal, if I could just jump in there, I think what I found particularly interesting was, of course, the letter that you referred to from Puran Singh back in 1928, who himself recognised the simple fact that if you pursue Hindu imperialism and you essentially divide the communities into their religious factions, you are effectively becoming the architect of a breakup of India as we know it. And I think that is interesting. Of course, that was under the British rule. Now, the British in 1947 handed control of India over to the Brahmanical caste, effectively, who then took a pre-packaged colony from the British and have been running it ever since. So I find it quite an interesting insight that this recognition that Hindu imperialism, if it is indeed successful, will indeed inevitably lead to the breakup of India. Now, I don't want to go down that route because I want to stay on this subject, particularly of this accusation of apartheid. And you just touched on it there. You talked about, of course, there is this perception of religious apartheid that is continuing in India. Could you elaborate? Could you give us some examples then of why you believe there is religious apartheid going on in present-day India?
So they are the major religions is so-called Hinduism, Islam, Christians, and Sikhs. So let's talk one by one what's happening to non-Hindus. The Muslims, which is the largest minority after the Hindus, has faced rising incidents of discrimination, violence, communal rights, mob attacks, and hate crimes. Dalits and Christians have suffered the same. Increasing frequency of lynching, violent acts against the Muslims, often justified by the allegation of cause slaughter, love jihad, has intensified fear of growing religious apartheid. So it's just enough to say this guy killed a cow. No, there's no proof is required, and they are killed, their house is destroyed. And there's a bulldozer culture where the government can go destroy your house and your family without having any intervention by the court. There are some Hindu groups who are openly, especially even the Prime Minister Modi before the last election was openly campaigning against the Muslims. And he did not succeed, fortunately. There's a member of assembly in Uttar Pradesh, which is the largest state, who is publicly campaigning against the Muslim, and now I think the courts have challenged him. I don't know what the outcome. Probably nothing will happen. There's economic and social segregation. The rural Muslims are crushed with the poverty, and it's not known to the world. They are so crushed, they're not even able to speak. There's a ghettoization of their communities. The Syrian Amendment Act, which was a problem a few years ago, excluded Muslims becoming a citizen if they come from any area of oppression. So the exclusion is based on the religion. So there is a destruction of mosques, their rights. So we will talk about few that I'm familiar with. Gujarat riots in 2002. There was a train where the Hindus were killed in retaliation. The Muslims were attacked. With the blessing of Modi government, 1,000 people died. There's a book called Gujarat Files, documented all that, and the lady is under threat. Modi was one of the architect, and his Home Minister Ahmed Shah was also with him. They were court cases, but they have not been punished. Modi was actually denied visa to US based on the Gujarat riots, but that was later allowed when he became Prime Minister. Daily riots in 2020, that's against the Syrian Amendment Act. There were 53 people killed in riots. Muzaffarnagar riots, 2013, communal violence broke down. Thousands of people were forced to leave their homes, and a lot of injuries and death. So and then there's a demolition of the mosque, Babri Mosque, which is well known to the world. 1992, it was demolished. The riots took place. 2,000 people died, mostly Muslims, and they have erected a temple in that place. There are several mosques, I can't even tell you the name. There are thousands now. They are trying to find a temple under them. They will put some evidence so they can destroy them. Even the RSS chief has told them, please stop that, because it's so shameful. Now he's being criticized. Now the Bangladesh is a Muslim country. The Bengal was divided into two. So the Prime Minister had to leave because of the corruption charges. They have brought a Nobel laureate to run the place, and Indian government is going all the way to make sure they destabilize their country. So I am not sure if you read one of the problem of corruption. The Adani group had a contract to sell them electricity at a very high rate than what they could get otherwise, and they have cancelled that. So that has affected Modi's friend or Modi's boss or whatever you call him. So all those things are economic problems, but they're using religion. So their everyday thing, the Hindus are suffering in Bangladesh, but more Muslims are suffering in India than Hindus are suffering in Bangladesh. But the narrative is controlled by Indian media, which is controlled by the government. So this is in a nutshell the against the Muslims. Then against the Christians, since May 1923, there have riots taken place in Manipur and some of the eastern states. There's a significant Christian population in Manipur and other eastern states, which most of them came from so-called scheduled caste or low caste. And some reservation has been done, so they control the rural areas, or at least this is reserved for them. The majority community, which is Malays, they have now started acting, and they said they should be classified as scheduled caste. And one court has given some indication to the government that they should consider, and the right have taken place. The churches are destroyed, people are uprooted, they had to leave their home. Ethnic tensions are at the worst. The Modi government, especially Prime Minister, have not spoken any word. So this has not stopped. There is a 384, some churches have been destroyed, and it's an ongoing problem. The Christian minorities in eastern states are now getting together. 386 religious factions were destroyed. They're getting together. I think they will be fighting for another independent state like we are fighting for Khalistan. So this is I think is coming. Breaking of India will take place because the religious apartheid is getting worse every day.
Dr. Grewal, I'd like to circle back to that point in a moment, but of course we have discussed in detail the persecution, the religious apartheid against the Muslim community and of course against the Christian community up in Manipur. Obviously the one we haven't touched on yet is of course the Sikh community, who we obviously cover on a regular basis. Could you run through then, I think obviously we are all, I'm sure most of our audience are aware of some of the more high level, more obvious visual elements of persecution against the Sikh community. But could you talk us through why you believe the Sikh community is particularly religiously persecuted by the Indian government? Why and in what way?
So this all the promises given to the Sikhs by Congress leaders were never kept. And one of the opposing factors was RSSP, which later became BJP. And when from 1950-51, they started a campaign where they guided the Hindus in Punjab to deny that their mother tongue is Punjabi. So there was one group of publishers who perpetuated that, and that thing got worse. 1984 attack on Golden Temple, which is also known as a news card, we have talked about before. The BJP leaders actually pushed Indira Gandhi, and they have actually celebrated even in their books that they take credit that they did that, and this was, according to them, necessary to teach a lesson. Operation Shanti, that's the genocide in Delhi of Indira Gandhi death. A lot of these BJP people were named in the court cases, but nothing ever came out. One of the gentlemen who was election agent for Vajpayee, Mr. Jain, I don't remember his name was in that. Congress did not punish anybody. 14 years of rule by BJP, nobody has been punished. In fact, they are the worst. They are not only recognizing Sikh rights, they are actually trying to assimilate Sikhs, and by all means, they want to say the Sikhs are Hindus. They even want to end our identity. So they have created this Rashtriya Sikh Sangat organization. Their aim is to take over SGPC, which is the controlling body or management of Gurdwaras. They are very actively working on that. They are trying to take the Punjab's water out of Punjab, and they're trying to punish the farmers' agitation, which is basically started by Punjab farmer, which is a Punjab farmer by tradition is mostly a Sikh farmer. So because they are Sikhs, they are being punished, and the government does not want to help them. Even now, there's a big struggle going on, and one of the senior farm leader is on hunger strike, which I think in few days he is expected to die, but government does not want to do anything. So some of the there are at least 10 gurdwaras. I don't know if we have a time to go through. There's an article by Singh Grewal. 10 gurdwaras have been destroyed, mostly in Uttarakhand, UP, and Gwalior area. So every day there's more and more destruction of Sikh Gurdwara, Sikh symbols, and somebody told me, I have not been able to verify, that in Delhi area, the Sikhs and Muslims, if they want to rent a house or apartment, they are denied. So you can see at what level this has creeped in. Recently, former Prime Minister Mr. Singh died. He was some 90 years old. He's known for liberating the India's economy and delivering India from bankruptcy to prosperity in his time. Manmohan Singh was the architect. He died. Traditionally, there's a place where all these former leaders like Prime Minister have been cremated. This is just a symbolic gesture. He was denied because he was sick. It's so shameful. Some of the people who have a conscience have spoken up, but this majority government has no conscience. Even when you're dead, you are still considered enemy just because you are sick. Recently, I just learned from Satluj TV that there was a picture in Parliament where General Arora, the Sikh general who was leading the Indian Army, and the during Bangladesh war, Pakistani general surrendered in front of him, showing that picture. It was in the Parliament. So just because he was Sikh general, now they have removed that from the Parliament. Even the history is being changed, and all the sacrifices the Sikhs have done is being denied or removed. Religious books are being changed. So Sikhs are also in the same category as, even though they call, oh, you are Hindus, but they are also trying to destroy Sikh identity, Sikh prosperity, and promoting Hindutva. So this religious apartheid, which is the subject we chose today, is very similar to what happened in South Africa, but much worse, and it's continuing at monumental proportions. So the world has to wake up and help us to end this. The Western countries which stop doing business with South Africa, they need to do the same thing with the Indian government. By supporting the Indian business, you are supporting corrupt people like Adani. And recently, since Modi came, the Indian currency against the dollar has been reduced by 50%, has lost value by 50%. So if you are doing investment in India, you have lost 50% of your investment. So it's not a good place for investment either. I think my appeal to the free world, freedom-loving people is to wake up and do something like they did in South Africa to end this religious apartheid so that people can be liberated to freedom.
And as a final question, Dr. Grewal, and circling back to the point that we touched on a couple of times now, we talked about Manipur and what's happening there. And of course, we have areas like Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir. And we have talked about, as indeed predicted back in 1928 by Puran Singh, that segregating communities into their religious elements is inevitably going to lead to ghettoization, effectively, on a geographical scale, of peoples divided by religion. And therefore, the inevitable conclusion of that is for each region, each area, to then demand secession, demand its own independence. So do you think then that it is likely, bearing in mind how long this has been going on, that India has been artificially kept whole as one part, firstly by the British Empire, and then since 1947 by the Brahmins, who took over a colonial control of India? Do you think the seeds for India's destruction are already sown a long time ago, that all these areas now, like Manipur, like J&K, of course, like the Punjab, and areas like Tamil Nadu, for example, do you think it is inevitable that India will break apart? And do you think it's likely that it's going to happen in the foreseeable future?
Yes, I think most of the people who have interest in that part of the world, even some of the free press, which is very little in India, they are speaking about that they think that India will break into Khalistan, Kashmir, and the eastern states will break up. And the South already have been, even though they call themselves Hindus, but they don't seem to have anything common with the Northerns. So South will break up. I think this Hindutva people will have few states in the center. They probably will be very happy. They want total control. They don't care about anybody else. I think they are going to help break this India. I think this has outlived its utility as one country. I think it's falling apart very rapidly, and I am hoping the people who have some common sense, who can do good work, will start taking part in India in this breakup. And I am hoping our people, the Sikhs, don't sleep this time and they get what they need and what they deserve.
Indeed, as we often say on this channel, why not give the Hindu Imperialists what they want? Give them their own country, as long as each region gets its own country. And of course, we're referring to Khalistan. Dr. Grewal, unfortunately there we must leave it, but indeed we will be talking with Dr. Grewal again soon to continue our discussion. Dr. Grewal, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. Thanks so much for joining us once again.
Thank you, Angus, for having me.
And thank you for watching the Satluj TV podcast. We will see you next time.